There have been a lot of interesting things going on with the Diamond Comics bankruptcy. It appeared Alliance Entertainment had acquired the company, and then at the last second, Diamond said, no, actually, we're going to sell it to two other companies that bid less money. And obviously, there was a lawsuit filed. I recorded a video talking about the shady practices of Diamond and some of the fallout from the bankruptcy that was really eye-opening, the enormous lack of interest in almost all of Diamond's assets. But before I got it completed, there's actually been an outcome in the case, so we'll cover that first, and then we'll follow it up with all the information that kind of led to this moment. Diamond comic distributors and subsidiaries, including Alliance Game Distribution, will be sold to Alliance Entertainment according to a filing in the bankruptcy case today. Although Alliance Entertainment was declared the winner of the day of the bankruptcy auction, Diamond attempted to change the winner to a joint bid from Universal Distribution and WizKids and NECA parent company Ad Populum, which resulted in a lawsuit by Alliance Entertainment last weekend. We await the order from the court, but it appears the decision has been made. So that is, I guess, the final statement from the court. No, in fact, Diamond does not get to back out of the deal and declare somebody else the winner when someone had a clear winning bid. Alliance Entertainment doesn't get to be dicked around in the entire situation. So what we thought was true at the very beginning, Alliance Entertainment now owns essentially all of Diamond, is in fact the case, even though it looked there for a minute like they tried to basically make it null and void and go in another direction. As I said earlier, I recorded a video kind of spelling all this stuff out that led to this moment. So let's get to that and all the very interesting, weird, shady shit that Diamond Comics were trying to get away with. Alliance Entertainment was the winning bidder in the Diamond Comics bankruptcy auction and all that kind of stuff. And we were going to have a new major player, not only in comic book distribution, but maybe free comic book day, maybe the previews, maybe toys, tabletop gaming, all that stuff that Diamond was doing. It seemed like Alliance had just bought it all for a pretty substantial price. It turns out that is not the case. In fact, Diamond is now being sued, and there are new owners, as in two, of what actual Diamond is, and not everything got acquired. And this is all pretty shady, to be completely honest. At least it reads really shady. Obviously, I was not in the room. Everybody has their own perspective. But these are the informations that are coming out there. So we'll cover why they're being sued, what the fallout is, why they decided to make these decisions, some of the weird stuff that went on with the auction that was very telling about how much interest there wasn't in a lot of what Diamond owned. And then at the end, we'll kind of cover how this is going to end up affecting not only comic book readers, retailers, publishers, stuff like that, because there's going to be a lot of fallout from all this. But let's get into the big suing. Alliance Entertainment has filed a lawsuit against Diamond Comics distributors, accusing them of deceptive conduct during failed acquisition talks. According to the suit, Diamond promised Alliance exclusivity and inside access to its financials to facilitate a smooth buyout. Alliance alleges they were led to believe they'd be acquiring Diamond's distribution business outright, only to be blindsided when Diamond filed for bankruptcy and entered into an asset sale with other parties instead. Alliance claims they invested substantial resources based on Diamond's representations and are now seeking damages, arguing that they were strung along and shut out of a fair bidding process, which is kind of weird because I thought they won the bidding process, but they decided not to accept that bid, which apparently they did. One was substantially bigger than the other bids combined. It really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it definitely feels like Alliance Entertainment is very, very pissed off, thinking that they were basically used the entire time to where it looked like they were going to buy them outright. Then they filed for bankruptcy, had to go into the auction against other bidders, put in a substantial bid, won, and they still aren't going to own the assets because they've decided to go in a different direction. And this is pretty shady stuff. It sounds like Steve Jeppy and company were really stringing these guys along, wasting a lot of their time, money. It sounds like they put a lot of investment just as far as trying to acquire it. How would the transition go? Who would be in charge of what? How are we going to fold all these things into Alliance Entertainment and grow the scope of what our company is going to be? So you can't really blame them for suing in the end because they're absolutely pissed off. During bankruptcy proceedings, it was revealed that the court-approved sale ended up being split between two buyers, Universal Distribution, who acquired Diamond's comic book distribution operations, and Ad Populum, who purchased the warehousing and fulfillment infrastructure. This division was favored by some debtors because it offered the best chance to preserve the comic book distribution legacy. Universal Distribution, already a player in the Canadian market, was seen as more likely to continue business as usual, including honoring relationships with retailers and publishers. Other bidders, like Alliance, were reportedly more interested in asset stripping or shifting the company's focus toward broader logistics, something Jeppy and the bankruptcy estate wanted to avoid. So there you go. They were basically shut out despite having a higher bid. It's going to Universal Distribution as far as the comic book distribution assets, and then Ad Populum is getting the warehousing and logistic portion of what was up for sale. So they can continue business as usual. And I do think this is probably a mistake, because if business as usual was such a desired end state for Diamond Comics distributors, they probably wouldn't have filed for bankruptcy. If business as usual was really working for Diamond Comics distributors, DC Comics wouldn't have left them years ago. Marvel Comics wouldn't have left them years ago. Image Comics wouldn't have left them years ago and made them basically a shell of their former selves, to where they ended up having to file for bankruptcy and sell off all the assets. I don't think the idea that business as usual was probably the way to go. And I do have a feeling, just a feeling, I don't know this for certain because I haven't talked to anybody, but just when you kind of read out and you see what happened there, that I do think self-preservation by certain key employees likely was a driving factor in a lot of this. Obviously, we already talked about the big bonuses and everything that they were going to be getting, which is kind of interesting, because if they'd gone with the Alliance Entertainment bid, their bonuses, I believe, would have been bigger. What really came out that was interesting during the auction process really should open your eyes. The full scope of Diamond's decline was laid bare during the bankruptcy auction. Out of 83 lots of assets offered, ranging from warehouse equipment to vehicles and software systems, only 23 received bids. Major pieces, including entire facilities and even Diamond's proprietary point-of-sale systems, drew little or no interest. This highlights just how diminished Diamond's value was at the time of the auction, and how much goodwill and relevance the company had lost. Despite decades as the comic industry's central distributor, its physical infrastructure was seen as disposable by most of the market. And I think that kind of plays out in the way that Diamond had been crumbling over the years. The reason that they crumbled wasn't because they didn't have great exclusive contracts. They had Marvel, DC, Image, and basically every other publisher in America. The reason that they left was because their infrastructure sucked, and also because they decided to unilaterally do an entire shutdown of the industry without talking to anybody. But their point of sale system obviously is archaic and it sucks. Nobody was even considering putting in a bid on something like that. And so much of their stuff was out of date or irrelevant that it appears essentially 75% of it is worthless, as in it didn't get a bid. It wasn't acquired during the auction process because so many of their processes and their systems and their logistical infrastructure was so wildly out of date and inadequate, it wasn't seen as any type of asset worth acquiring. That was the diminished state of Diamond Comics when they filed for bankruptcy. I'm saying business as usual, probably not the way ahead. New vision, new ideas, new ways of doing distribution, new ways of looking at the industry, new types of logistics support and all that stuff is what Diamond really needed. And unfortunately, I don't think that we're going to get a lot of that. I think it's mostly just going to get folded into Universal Distributors up in Canada. And a lot of things are unfortunately going to stay the same. Now, just kind of talking about how this is going to affect everybody. The breakup of Diamond marks the end of its once powerful monopoly and the beginning of a new, more fractured era for comic distribution. Retailers may face more logistical complexity navigating multiple distributors like Universal, Lunar, and Penguin Random House to order books from different publishers. Publishers, meanwhile, are likely to reevaluate their distribution deals as trust in centralized systems continues to erode. For comic book buyers, people like you and me, the changes might mean fluctuating availability, delays in shipping, or changes in pricing and packaging as different distributors scale up. While this could eventually lead to a more competitive and resilient market, the short-term outlook is uncertain, and the entire supply chain is going through growing pains as it adjusts to the post-Diamond era. And we're already kind of seeing that. I hear from a lot of people, certainly Patreon backers that I talk to every day, saying, hey, we didn't get our Marvel books that were supposed to be distributed by Diamond this week. And that's kind of been the normal thing for quite some time. A lot of these books have been delayed. Universal has done comic book distribution, but I believe it's only really been in Canada. Obviously, their scope of responsibilities are going to wildly expand, covering the lower 48 and all these other publishers that Diamond already had deals with. I do not believe, or I wouldn't expect, this to go very, very smoothly. Obviously, a lot of retailers have already been working with the multiple distributor thing, Penguin Random House, Lunar, now Universal, and I think these things will probably get even more complicated, at least in the short term, as new systems come online, new point of sale, and all that kind of stuff. People are going to have to get used to some short-term change, but ultimately, competition makes everything better. And if Universal is able to take Diamond in the shape that it's in right now, make it leaner, a little bit better, more cost-effective, more efficient at distributing, and maybe not even damaging people's comic books, in the end, everyone's going to do better off for it. But right now, I imagine there's a lot of retailers, a lot of publishers, especially the smaller publishers, that just don't know what's going on now. And I do think a lot of the buyers are going to see some short-term inefficiencies kind of boil to the surface. It's going to be very frustrating, but give it maybe 12 to 18 months, and I think everything will probably be worked out, and we'll have a healthier, stronger industry without Diamond Comics and their former management really being an anchor weighing the entire industry down. Almost ended up being a single point of failure. Thankfully, Jim Lee and DC Comics saw that that was a terrible idea, brought in competition. Marvel saw that was a good idea, brought in more competition, and now a lot of these publishers have multiple distributors that they can work with. Now a lot of these publishers have options, and a lot of the retailers are actually getting product on time. They're getting product that's not destroyed, and hopefully Universal distributors will be able to follow their lead and kind of fix everything, and we'll get a much better industry in the end. But it does sound like Diamond was doing some very, very, very shady business dealings, and I cannot blame Alliance Entertainment for being very pissed off, because it did appear that they won the bankruptcy auction bid and had everything. Now apparently they have nothing. Now they're suing them, and we'll see what happens there. I don't think I'll be talking about this much more in the immediate future, but you never know. Somebody else might sue Diamond next week, which I guess would be par for the course at this point. If you appreciate this kind of coverage about comic book news, reviews, opinions, all that good stuff, and you would like to be part of the Thinking Critical family, providing some honesty in comic books needed now more than ever. You want to help us keep the lights on, the videos flowing, the best place to do that is Think Critical Patreon. There's a link in the video description. There's a button right here. And if you support us there and you help us with our mission, we are going to give you amazing podcasts featuring your favorite guest right here on the channel. Hope to see you there very, very soon.